Hello and welcome to Rise and Shine with Alissa. I am your hostess, the consultress, bringing you amazing conversations from the front lines of innovation, entrepreneurship, investment, and parenting, because we are all in some form or fashion involved in a family dynamic of sorts. And if you're invested or interested in being an entrepreneur or becoming one, we need growth mindset. So I want to welcome to the forum here Miss Nora Simpson, who has an amazing energy and a super gigantic brain. I've learned so much from you already in the short time we've known each other. So welcome to Rise and Shine.
Thank you for having me. It's so great to be here. Yay!
Right on. So we found each other on a traditional business networking
Good
meeting.
old fashioned. Good old
Good and
fashioned.
old fashioned for sure. And it was really interesting because the fact that we were both in there providing value for someone who couldn't make the regular meeting,
hmm
but like lit up the room in a way, like that is how I see you in my world. Every time you enter
Oh,
a
thank
forum,
you.
we've done it a couple of times now, and you just, you know, have this gravitas. And
Thank you.
I think that's the right word. But anyway, so tell us a little bit about, how you became the Nora Simpson strategic and how
The
that
Nora
like
Simpson
represents
strategy.
you and your path.
Sure. So I have a neuroscience-based methodology that I developed over about 2 decades, starting when I was a teenager. I don't think I knew I was developing a neuroscience-based methodology as a teenager. I was just somebody who got very, very fascinated by solving problems. And it was sort of inconvenient that I was living in a teenager body. And yeah, I'm really lucky that I was just always really interested in solving big, big, weird, thorny, twisted up problems. So by the time I finished kind of creating this whole methodology, I had worked with people, empowering women and men living on less than $1 a day in rural Africa, Latin America, and South Asia to lead their communities into full economic success. And I did that in my early 20s. And when I worked with that group, we were working with 14 million people on a budget of $8 million per year. And most of the people in that group had never been to school or learned to read. If for the folks living in rural Africa, Latin America, South Asia, and they were phenomenal leaders and phenomenal uh, growers. And it was just such a fabulous kind of way to turn my brain upside down about whatever stuff I got taught about who's capable of what, in America. But even before that, I was really involved in justice reform as a teenager in New Orleans, where I'm from, and was like very involved at juvenile court, trying to like create mentorship opportunities for young kids going through the system, et cetera. So all of that was a major shaping influence. And then I had, I think I thought I would work in anti-poverty work across the world my whole life. And then Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans. And I am from New Orleans and I got PTSD, and the journey to heal around that trauma connected me very deeply with not just neuroscience, but very tribal, like tribal with a positive spin, not a negative spin, because tribe can be both, very positive healing tribal experiences, as well as one-on-one experiences and like whole swaths of neuroscience research and blah, 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 and ended up kind of becoming an activist in these like healing support groups. And um, before I knew it, I'd worked with thousands of people kind of in my spare time, as I was also healing. And then found out even people who weren't like hitting bottom wanted to talk to me and learn about the stuff I had discovered. So is that, what do you think?
Yeah.
Did I
I
get,
mean, so yes, that's a great scratch surface. I want to just pull out and tease out what you said just before was I found out that I could help more than just the people who were hitting rock bottom. And I just want to
hmm
tease that out for a second
hmm
because so many people, when they start their entrepreneurial journey, or even while they're continuing, guilty of it myself, we think we have to save people. There's this mentality
mm,
around if it's not horrible, then it must not be that bad. And so for me, seeing like the kind of spectrum of experiences like a bell curve, I was wondering why there were so many activist and charity momentum pieces on the ends of that bell curve, where
Mm.
it's super duper 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 impoverished, dejected, etc., and then the go for the highly 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 affluent and target and reach for the stars and you can do it too. And I found that there was a lot left to be desired that would support the everyday person
Mhm.
or the person who is, getting by, doing all right, but could be extremely positively affected if they had access to the right tools, if they had access to perspective that could help them shift their thinking or give them access to a network of people that could really make a difference for them. So a lot of the work that I feel like, is kindred between us is that we have shifted gears into helping those who have the desire and the means to be able to create positive momentum in their life and really make a positive impact on the rest of it, because it's like money. When you have a little bit, you think $100 is a lot, and when you have a lot of money, you think that giving $100 is like not enough, right? So can you speak a little bit to that, like temperance you found in building your business to have a bigger impact and expose and affect more people?
Absolutely. I mean, I think what you're asking me is to talk a little bit about my journey on how I became someone who could earn money doing what I do. I feel like that's what you're asking me. I kind of want to say something slightly different,
Go for it.
which goes with the theme, um, which is that, um, and it actually connects back to what you said at the very beginning of this talk, where you talked about this whole like we're entrepreneurs and we are here in this really exciting time of growth and time of disruption, age of disruption. These are your words. I don't remember if you said them on the recording or not, but I'm quoting you.
Yeah.
And you talked about how there is information, knowledge, and skill set that we have that we find that people can benefit from. So let me answer what I think was your immediate question, and then I want to like riff. Is that
Cool.
okay?
Yeah, man.
So your immediate question sounded like, how do I give myself permission to market myself to, or how do our listeners give themselves permission to market themselves to people who are, regular humans going through life, showing up, earning pretty good money, maybe not earning the most money, and definitely not like in, total crash mode. How do I actually find reasonably stable clients who are willing um to pay me honorably for my service, and I don't have to feel all the guilt in the world for taking some of their immediate cash, because they're fine and they can pay me this much money and it's fine. And I think that that's a question that I think really lands most deeply with female business owners, because women are socialized in our culture to believe that like we should basically martyr ourselves and sacrifice ourselves on the altars of goodness and
Mm.
and mothering everyone and all of that. So I think something that might be useful for folks who are trying to kind of gain purchase in the areas like get themselves to that space where they feel confident and comfortable marketing to stable, secure people without only needing it to be, well, you're a gajillionaire, so it's not going to hurt you to pay me this, right? Because it's actually good for people to have to hurt a little bit to pay you, because they'll take it more seriously, right?
Hurts so good.
Right. And if they're completely broke and they're just like, the money's not there, like, wish them well, send them to a free 12-step program and move on, you know?
Mm.
Um, and um, so one of the things that I think is so important is that we are all in search of different solutions day to day to make sense of this life we're living. This is a very strange time in our history. We have lost enormous levels of community. We've lost, um, we're living in a time when things that we had been accustomed to in terms of like just the normal day-to-day ingredients of how human brains are healthy have become less and less available.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not anti-progress. Like I'm not one of these people that's like, go back to trad wife life. Like I think that progress is really important, and the emphasis on individual expression and individual rights is really important as part of our last 500 years of Western history. And I believe that one of the things that has happened as we've engaged in this individual rights movement over the last 500 years of Western history, and whether you like it or not, every single one of us, wherever you sit politically, has benefited massively from the huge changes that have happened to make it so that people are truly free to make choices in our country that they can't really make in a lot of other countries about their fate, about, their future, about how they earn their money, how they spend their time, et cetera. Um, that that urge towards individualism was a direct response to the parts of tribalism that can be yucky, the parts of tribalism that lead to war, the parts of tribalism that lead to suppression, the parts of tribalism that say if you're born into this caste, you are no longer like, you have three professions that are available to you and nothing else, and that's just your life, that's your fate. And we don't like that in America. No matter what your political belief, we don't like hearing you're only allowed to do these three things and nothing else, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there is something to be really appreciated about that. That being said, as we've gotten farther and farther and farther away from the tribal connections, and ingredients of healthy brain function, um, we have also lost the good parts of tribe. And so there is a huge need across our culture right now for people to bring useful information, warm support, reliable, solid, uh, trustworthiness,
Mm-hmm.
and vision and innovation and creativity. There is a huge need for these things to continue to blossom in good enough balance with each other for us to discover how to rebuild a healthy, freedom-oriented version of tribe here in our country at every level, micro to macro.
Yeah.
So I think that there's a lot of roles for leaders of all types across that landscape.
Yeah, and the piece that ties it home for me about how do I stop trying to save people in my elevator pitch is that we have got to divorce the mindset that it has to really, really suck for someone to be in a little bit of pain that they want to solve. Because it doesn't have to be that massive amount of pain because there's so much going on. I've heard you say there's a smorgasbord of new normals that we have to establish because our foundation has been rocked as a global society, let alone national, that we have to now intentionally, and we have the opportunity now intentionally to love up on each other by virtue of shining that light of the problems that we solve. So when
Absolutely.
I hear people starting or pivoting in their business saying, I help people get out of X and Y and Z, and they paint this picture of a bedraggled mess on the side of the road, and then I help them become Prince, King, or, heiress,
You
whatever
know,
that looks
I
like,
think
that dynamic of speaking in sales is actually something that people mentally have to get over because we can provide value by describing a situation in a context without saying, doesn't this really, 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 really suck? Because maybe it just sucks a little. Maybe there's a problem that's worth solving that creates massive impact on the other side of solving it. And when we can speak that, is this the pain because I see it, because I've experienced it, and I love it because I went through it? And here's what's possible. When we speak that what's possible language alongside of it, now we're not like polarizing it so much, but we're saying, hey, man, I might be a link in your chain.
for sure. And I think that um, most people are very scared of asking for money. Most people are excited to do side hustles. They're excited to help people. And when it comes time to ask for money, they're totally terrified. And so it's easier for them to rationalize that they have to do this horrible thing called ruining someone's life by asking them to pay for services.
Uh-huh.
I think they have to rationalize it by saying, well, you're in dire straits, so you need me. And honestly, so much of the attraction to that level of drama is actually about how scared we are to ask for money. And every human being gets uncomfortable when it comes time to talk about money. And that's why I write about the neuroscience of money and the neuroscience of sales a lot. And I have coached more than 500 companies in the neuroscience of sales. And specifically, there's just so much terrible sales training out there, and most of it has to do with get to know your client and dig deep for the pain. Like when I hear you talking, I'm like, oh, this is what happens after 50 years of training. Dig deep, take them deeper, take them worse. Oh God, right? And that's actually not like that's I feel like that's training you give to men who've never had feelings be allowed to come out of their mouths. Do you know what I mean? But as women, we have capacities to do to engage at such subtler, more nuanced levels. And um, I think for me, I mean, I have helped more than 50 entrepreneurs, like solopreneurs, double their revenue in 3 to 6 months. And that's to me, that's just sexy. Like I'm just like, hey, are you a solopreneur? I've worked with 700 companies total, right? Are you a solopreneur? Do you want to double your revenue in 3 to 6 months? You and I should talk about a neuroscience of sales program, period, full stop, right? So it's not you're desperate, you're dying. It's like, um, would it be fun for you to go from 10 grand to 20 grand a month? Or from 5 to 10 or from 20 to 40? Would that be interesting? Would you like that? Okay, we should talk about it. Cool. So simple. The other thing that it was sort of coming up for me as you were talking about the big drama piece is that we we tend to say, I want to save someone from a problem, as opposed to, I think you were talking about the what's possible, as opposed to the idea of like, what are you hungry for? Like, what's the hunger? Um, that's something I think is really important. And then, as you know, my big popular thing that I've been teaching now for the last 5 years right now is called the neuroscience of overcoming distractions and doubling productivity. And I've done it with both sales teams and operational teams that are not necessarily trying to develop business every minute. And this this time and place in our culture, we have now achieved full distractibility across the day. Like everyone is distracted, everyone is
All
burnt
the
out.
time.
I can quote you some of the data um, because it'll be fun to quote it to you. But when I teach my neuroscience of productivity transformations, which are 12-week transformations, usually for teams, because that's actually the magic unit is like the team, because you can get back to this person who wants to ask you something from outside the company. But if somebody's like, you told me you wanted this by 4 o'clock and I have a question about it, you're gonna put down whatever you're working on and you're gonna go help them. So how we actually transform productivity is we do it in units of team rather than units of individual. And I have consistently seen my clients double their productive output while shortening their workday. And that includes sales teams doubling their closed deals or doubling their revenue or both while shortening their workday. And that's only possible because the problem has actually gotten so bad around distractibility. And I would love to talk more about that, obviously. I'm very, very passionate about cell phones and everything else.
Yeah. We have
But
our
yeah,
distraction, our multi-purpose distraction device in our
yes,
pocket at all
our
times.
little crack pipe, yeah. Um,
Yes. Okay, so
back,
how many of you in watching this last 15 to 20 minutes checked your notifications or are watching this on that little crack pipe? It is like my son goes on his video game console, brings his phone in the room, talking to his girlfriend, and also on another sub platform on his phone while he's doing all these things. And he's like, Mom, I'm bored. Holy cow, man. No, you are so distracted. You're not paying attention or getting value from anything. I love him and he's super smart, so he needs a lot of stimulation. I get that. Most of us out here are seeking, excitement. And a lot of what we need to do to be successful is actually, to quote Nora Simpson, the boring stuff. So when we kind of calm everything down and get to the boring stuff, all of the pieces of us that have been ignored, sideswiped, or swept under the rug while we were in the process of being super freaking busy, they start to go, oh, now's the time. Can I talk to you now? And so this paradigm of distraction that you'd address actually is the paradigm of not addressing oneself where you actually need love and care. And this goes across the board, whether you're talking about that in the context of family, in the context of your business and who you are inside of that business, or the business that you do, the value you're providing for customers outside of that, whether that's investment strategies, etc. This paradigm of like, I'm so busy that I'm bored. It's like seeing the circle connect to itself, or what, the snake eating its tail, right?
Well, so let's talk about that. So in 2013, most Americans checked our phones 150 times per day. And we thought that was a lot back then. And I was doing this research back then, so I was like, oh my God, it's 150 times per day. In 2023, it was 352 times per day. So it has grown a lot. And, the thing about the office is that it's a really interesting laboratory where a lot of very interesting research about human behavior gets done, more than in most other group situations. So in 2005, the early productivity researchers, a group called BaseX, was one of the earliest ones, published one of the first reports quantifying the amount of time people were losing to interruptions and distractions merely because email had changed the way people corresponded. Because before it was snail mail and phone calls, and with email there were so many more interruptions, distractions, etc., that just the time people spent putting down their task, picking up email, responding to it, and then the interruption recovery time, because there's always an interruption recovery time, was taking away, according to this research firm that had been observing productivity in the workplace since the 80s, they could very easily measure that about 2 hours per day were being lost to email. Now, fast forward, more research firms, more researchers, more university professors started catching on over the years. By 2015, the consensus in the research was that we were losing 6 hours per day from all the distractions. And what happened between 2005 and 2015? Oh, well, Apple introduced the iPhone, Google introduced the Droid, Apple introduced the what is it called? The App Store. Um, Facebook made itself available to non-college students. Instagram launched. So, and Slack came into being. So, with all of these changes just over 10 years from '05 to 2015, most people by 2015 were losing 6 hours per day. In 2018, a software company that tries to help people get their time back, called Rescue Time, estimated that across their 50,000 users, the average amount of time per day that their users were not receiving an email, a text, an alert from an app, a Slack message, a Teams message, etc., was 72 minutes across the whole day.
Wow. And
72 minutes when they weren't being asked for their attention by someone else. That was
yeah, and
2018. That was 6 years ago.
yeah, and that's not including all of the mental distractions that we put on ourselves when we're trying to focus, right? So on
Absolutely.
top of I have to sit down and concentrate on this deliverable or this project that I'm working on, now we have all these bells and whistles, vying for our attention. So, I love that you pointed out that it has grown exponentially in that 10-year period. And here we are almost 10 years later than that research period. So
Exactly.
we're
And to,
learning how now to
yeah,
shut off the notifications, how to
absolutely.
set limitations on our social media use. But it's not just social media, ladies and gentlemen. It's the entirety of the systems that you use to conduct communication. So I am going to say this loud and proud, and I will continue to beat this freaking drum to death. My video time is at my discretion for clients and vetted partners in places I choose to be. So when someone connects with me, the first time that we do it is always by phone call. Do you remember the 90s when we used to be able to sit and just totally dial in and pay attention to what the other person was saying because you were in the environment that you needed to be in? You were 100% present. And now, in the age of distraction or disruption, whatever you want to call it, people are very video needy because we went from in-person coffees to let's do Zoom all the time. Well, now we have this sedentary problem of being in the same place all the time, and like none of my neurons are firing because I'm not learning something innovative or what do you call new to me, and I'm
Hmm.
not walking around. I'm not involving my body in processing this information. I'm stuck.
Hmm.
So, here's one piece of advice that I can offer for folks that are, doing business from home, from the computer terminal is, for the love of God, turn the video off. Get back to one sense only of how to absorb and be with information, because we don't need all five senses all the time: hearing, seeing, smelling, tasting, touching. Yes, it's cool to be on video and have some like visual stimuli, but if that's at the expense of the energy of the person because they have less bandwidth, like this is me. I only have a certain bandwidth for video, and it usually caps out at about 2 hours per day. Those
Mm,
2 hours are going to the people who pay me a lot of money to be present with them and who
absolutely.
need to share the project and share the screen. Other than that, it's about preserving your attention and preserving your time.
Absolutely. And also, I'm a big believer that we have to fill the well. So, in my 12-week neuroscience of productivity transformation, I first I give people all the data. There's even more data about how basically our entire communication culture has become one of such urgency
Yeah.
that if you wait a day to respond to someone's email, it is true that you won't hear back from them for 2 weeks. But if you respond within 2 hours, they're still like on the thread with you. It's a really fascinating phenomenon that I find. So there's this whole thing about urgency and getting back to people so that they don't forget you exist because they lose thread so fast. People are so distracted all the time and they can only hold so much, et cetera. So the urgency communication culture is huge. And then the other piece, like just like you were saying, we're so tethered to this computer, especially now with work from home. It is such a blessing to get out of the house. Now, if you're lucky enough to have kids who have to leave your home to do
Yeah.
something related to childcare or schooling, whatever that looks like, in whatever, creative, cool, off the wall way you've created that for your kids, then that gives you a reason to get out of the house. That gives you a reason to hopefully where you live, see some trees, right? And experience nature. Um, when I talk about all this in my 12-week productivity transformation, we start with the insane data where we really understand how much our brains have truly been hacked and how much our brains now do this thing where we interrupt ourselves. Like if we go a certain amount of time, we actually can't sit still if someone isn't interrupting us because the dopamine feedback loop has gotten so strong. So we actually find reasons to interrupt our work and our focus. Um, then I introduce like the very specific self-care time structures that we introduce usually in teams. They're available, like I can do them with individuals and I have, but it's so powerful with a team. That's where you really see your exponential results. And then as we start working through the habit formation of that team time structure and of restoring the ability of the body to actually ingest information and produce output that's work related and high quality and high earning, that's when we see that actually we clear away so much of the trash that gets put into our brains all day. We have all this time for getting work done and we have to actually fill the well just a little bit each day. We have to go out in nature, we have to find music and art, we have to find things that don't come from a screen in order to give ourselves, physical touch, physical connection with other humans. If you don't live at home with your kids, um, or your kids are out of the house, or you're not a parent, you know, you get out and you see friends. Doesn't have to be every single day, but it should be consistent because
Yeah.
we have these baseline needs as
Yeah.
tribal beings that have just completely stopped being met.
Yep. And this is why community is so important. Being in communion and understanding and vibing with, riffing with important people in your life is necessary for survival. Like I will give
For
you
sure.
a thing I learned about decade plus ago is we need 4 hugs a day to survive,
Right.
8 to maintain, and 12 to thrive.
Mm-hmm.
Think about
Mm-hmm.
that in the era of COVID when nobody could touch and
Mm.
people continue to habitually now have this fear of physical touch.
Touching. Yeah.
It's really disrupting your actual physiology. It's disrupting your brain chemistry. It's disrupting your ability to connect and make meaningful discourse out of life. The other thing about that always on culture of communications, this is an interesting phenomenon because I want to just share with you a story real quick.
Please, yeah.
I was out at a conference and I am not a wallflower, as one of my friends, Wendy Sweet, said. She's like, poor
And
Alissa,
we
she's such a
and
wallflower.
and we love you for it, Alissa. We love you, consultress.
Yeah,
Go on.
I'm
Shine
loud.
that light. Shine
I
that
am
light.
I am present, but I met a bunch of amazing people who were up to awesome stuff in the world, who had very interesting and educational things to say. It was very insightful for me to engage, and I left there with like a pocket full of notes and a bunch of different people's contact information, and I immediately 2 days later had like a pseudo panic attack because I'm like, I'm not following up soon enough. They're going to forget me. And I know I didn't think that out loud. And I definitely didn't think that consciously, but I had this like very nervous and like, frenetic energy. And I was like, what is this about? And my girlfriend, Lisa, thank God for her, was like, maybe why you're not following up immediately is because I've heard you say you don't make decisions from that energy. And I was like, oh, right. I already taught this to myself that when I make decisions from here, I get more of this in my business, in my life, in my energy, my parenting, my relationships. And I was like, oh, so actually the right time for me to follow up, because I made such a big splash, I have to remember that it's not easy for people to forget me because I make connections, because I am a deep and meaningful person. I had to let go of that always on culture thinking process that I had, I don't know, adapted somehow, and think, okay, so now that it's a week and a half past, who is already done the frenzied follow up where when I follow up with a meaningful phone call, people are like, oh, wow, it's so great to hear from you. And then I'm back in the game. I feel back in my core and center. So, takeaway for me, I always learn something new when I'm with you. And it's like, you don't have to engage in the always on culture, but it's cool to be aware of it. So knowledge and
Absolutely.
wisdom are totally different beasts, and be willing to go counterculture. Be willing to schedule that phone call instead of that video call. Be willing to say, I need a hug right now, even though it feels really vulnerable at times, because these are the things that help us to invest in ourselves, invest in our businesses, and pay the world forward what value we have. So with that, I know we could be on this forum and talk for hours, Nora, we have, and we continue to. So I'd love to have you back.
Yay.
Where can people connect with you in the meantime? So that, is it your website? Do you want them to
Yeah,
connect
absolutely.
on
Go to
social?
simpsonstrategic.com. There's a contact form there that goes straight to my personal email inbox. So I will be responding personally. Personally. So simpsonstrategic.com. Feel free to reach out to me directly. I have two books on Amazon. There's a video actually on simpsonstrategic.com about the neuroscience of conquering distractions and like some of the data you've heard today. So hopefully it's a rich resource for folks, and I'm always happy to connect with people.
Yeah, right on. And stay tuned because Nora and I, this collaboration dynamic duo is not going more silent as it comes. This is going to ramp up. So stay tuned for what we cook up next. And in the meantime, please share this episode with someone who you feel needs a little bit of inspiration, information, and some excitement in their life. 3 people, go forward it. Click subscribe, like, comment. Let us know what you want to hear next from this dynamic duo. And we broadcast every Monday, 7:30 a.m. Eastern Time. Make sure you subscribe, share it with a friend. We will see you next time, friends. Same bat time, same bat channel. Thanks a million, Nora.
Thank you.
Bye.